Every now and then we find a place in Fallout 4 that has no terminals, no notes, and yet has a clear story written with blasted out environments and the skeletons of the dead. Mystic Pines is one of those places. Mystic Pines is a retirement home on the northeastern outskirts of Lexington. It's likely named after the nearby Mystic River, which in the game goes right by Lexington and in real life is a little ways away. This is the same river from which the 2003 Boston set Clint Eastwood movie got its name. As horrible as the nuclear apocalypse was, it gives us the good fortune to explore places like Mystic Pines as a snapshot of what life was like there the moment the bombs dropped. As we arrive, we pass through a pink garden fence with a bunch of pink flamingos in the front yard. As with many sad places like hospitals, people tend to surround themselves with bright colors and comic scenes to add a bit of levity to the place. The pink fence and pink flamingos may have made things feel a bit more bright and cheery. Upon entry, we find ourselves in a lobby, and we see all of the same Halloween decorations we come to expect in pre-war places. Now, this building is a big circle with a central courtyard. To explore it, we're gonna first turn right. This leads us to a sitting area next to a big kitchen. The room to the right looks like it might have been a meeting room. There's a long table here next to a couch, but there's also a wrecked bed. This seems like an odd arrangement for a bedroom. Heading out, we can explore the very tiny kitchen. I mean, this is a small kitchen, and all of the appliances are set against one wall, with a tiny eating space in one corner. Moving on, we arrive at the only two bathrooms here. The first one is the men's. Note that there's no urinal here. And the second one is the women's. I don't know how many people lived here, but it seems that the toilets are too small to support that large of a population. Just outside the bathrooms, we find our first skeleton. A man sits on a couch beneath some windows. He was just relaxing when the bombs fell. Next to the bathroom, we find our first bedroom, and this is terrifying. Look at how cramped this small room is. It's barely large enough to accommodate the bed. The chest of drawers is so close to the foot of the bed that you can't even open the drawers. Here, someone lived in this little cubicle, wasting away their final days watching television from bed. But at least they had a window. Heading out and around the corner, and we come to an interior greenhouse, or a winter garden. It has huge windows overlooking the river, looking east, and a skylight. To the right, we find an advanced locked security gate, and inside is the skeleton of a man in a wheelchair, surrounded by empty beer bottles. I can see the scene in my head. The alarms sound, reporters on the television talk about nuclear blasts, and this man grabs a case of beer and goes to the only happy place that he can think of. Maybe he came to this winter garden every day to tend some of his favorite plants. Maybe he would meet his daughter or his son here when they came for their monthly visit. The man rolled himself into this room and locked the gate, and here he sat drinking beer surrounded by a little bit of homegrown greenery as the nuclear fire rolled overhead. Against one wall, we find two first aid kits, and aside from some glue, that's all this room has. Looking out the window, we can barely see the Mystic River down the hill. There's also a fence back there. Is that another garden? In the corner, we can see the skeleton of a woman in a wheelchair. We'll explore that in a minute. Heading straight out from this winter garden, we pass through a door into an open-air courtyard. This must have been a nice place to walk through, but it's overshadowed by a large overpass. Can you imagine the noise that thundered overhead every moment of their lives as they lived out their remaining years in this tiny little retirement home? Who builds a retirement home underneath an overpass like this? As nice as it might be to sit on a bench in this open-air courtyard, the experience is pretty much ruined by this towering overpass. In one corner of the courtyard, amongst some rubble and a bathtub, we find a barrel filled with wood on fire. I don't suppose this was lit back before the bombs dropped. This must be a recent addition. Maybe somebody came here seeking shelter, but the sadness of the scene caused them to leave. Heading out of the courtyard, we find ourselves in the lobby. We can turn right to finish the loop. This brings us to a communal living room. There's a dresser and some furniture set out next to a television, and on the holotape player is Tales of a Junktown Jerky vendor, Take Your Business on the Road, which permanently improves prices when buying from vendors. Heading out the nearby door, we come to a patio overlooking a hillside with power lines. Not the most attractive sight in the world. Going back inside, we arrive at the bedrooms. Each one of these little bedrooms is incredibly cramped. One of them still has a skeleton inside. She lies stretched out on her bed with a window looking out into the courtyard and one piece of jet on a surgical tray near to her bed. Looks like this woman decided that she wanted to greet the apocalypse by taking some of her chems. The next room over is a confusing scene. We find a Jangles the Moon Monkey on a filthy bed and then a cabinet filled with toys. We've got a truck and a car. I don't suppose this was the room for a child. There's a wheelchair in the corner. Instead, these toys may have belonged to a grandmother. Maybe she kept these toys for her grandchildren, giving them something fun to do when they came to visit, encouraging them to visit more often. Or maybe she had a child of her own who died when that child was young, and she's kept these toys all these years to remember that child. Note that the woodwork lining these hallways is painted a bright and vibrant green. You can kind of see what the walls were painted like before time wore them away. We see hints of pink and green. That means that this old folks' home screamed the colors of bright pink and green. I don't know if I could live in a place like that. Hopefully it cheered someone up. Against this wall, we find an advanced locked door. This leads us to a back room with the stairway leading down into the basement. In the basement, we find a fusion generator with a fusion core, and most disturbingly, 2 coffins. One on the ground surrounded by garbage, and another one in storage on top of a storage crate. But you know, thinking about it, it does make sense. The inhabitants of this home were in their final moments of life. I'm sure this facility had to bury the dead quite frequently. They probably had these coffins at the ready in case the community woke up the next day to find one of their own members lying dead in bed. Now, I wanted to explore that garden in the back, so I headed outside and around back only to see that the pink fence was actually a small graveyard. And I do mean small. This entire graveyard is only long enough to accommodate one person lying lengthwise. That's why they're all stacked side by side and pressed against the wall. And probably the saddest sight of all, we find the skeleton of a woman in a wheelchair next to a gravestone covered in flowers. We know that this facility buried their own dead. The only reason a grave would be here is if one of their members died. And it must have been one of their members who didn't have any family, because normally a family would collect the remains of their loved one and bury them in a family plot at a local graveyard. But for a retirement home to bury the dead themselves, that person must not have had any family. And this woman in the wheelchair was clearly a member of this community. It's interesting that after everyone heard the announcement of the nuclear apocalypse, while some locked themselves in with green plants and beers, and others went to their bedrooms to take their chems, this lady rolled her wheelchair all the way to the back of the building to sit next to this grave. Maybe it was the grave of her husband. Maybe they came to this retirement home together and then he left before she did. Or maybe this was the only friend she made at Mystic Pines. She would wake up every morning and the two of them would play games together, talk about their children and their grandchildren. And then after she died, this woman couldn't make any more friends at the community. And so every day she would come back here and place flowers on the grave of her only friend. And that is the story of the Mystic Pines retirement home on the outskirts of Lexington in Fallout 4. Convalescent homes like this are some of the saddest places in the game, in my opinion. I think because they're so similar to what we find in reality. Here we don't find crazy dismembered bodies and piles of corpses and raider thrones and all sorts of horrible things from dark imagination. But we just find normal people living out the remainder of their lives doing incredibly mundane, dull things. Watching TV, playing checkers, gardening, waiting for their child to visit, or sitting by the graves of those that pass before them. I did another video on the Sandy Coves Convalescent Home, another Fallout 4 retirement home, which you can watch here if you're interested. Stories like this add realism to the world of Fallout 4. It makes it feel more like a real place, and I appreciate that. It takes a lot of time and energy to make places like this. Places that don't have terminal entries. They're not involved in any quests. They're just here to add a little bit more realism to the world. Things like this are the handiwork of people who really care about what they're making, and they care about the story that they're telling. And stories like this remind me to visit my parents and grandparents more often, to be kind to them while they're still around, and to listen to their stories while I still can. Thanks for watching, everybody. I make a new Fallout 4 video every single day of the week, so be sure to subscribe so that you get notified when I publish tomorrow's video. Do you have any thoughts on the Mystic Pines retirement home? Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I read all of my comments and I use them as inspiration for my future videos. And if you like what I do and you'd like to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Oxhorn community Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad that you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning with a brand new video.